Hi, Beck Mac here for Pop's Art Independent Artist Survival Series, and I am with a very special guest today. I'm here with the artist Luke Roberts. How are you, Luke?
Good, Dick. Loving being here.
It's wonderful to see you. Now, I'm very curious. Last night I received a letter from Pope Ellis that had some really powerful information in it. Can you shed some light on this for us?
Well, I believe quite a few people have received the letter, and naturally, Her Divine Holiness is most interested in the well-being of people during this time, and she sent out a message of hope and encouragement, plus some rather cryptic messages, as you would have read.
Yeah, it seems to allude to the fact that this is an incredible moment of change, but the changes that are coming, we have no that beyond our imagination. I'll just read a part from it. Coming events draw back the curtain of illusion, revealing truths kept hidden for centuries. Many may wish to reject the blinding light and shock of the revelations. Forced to live in darkness, and for so long, some eyes may find it extremely difficult to adjust. This is quite extraordinary information, Luke. And can you give us, what's your understanding of this?
I think Pope Ellis is talking about how we've been fooled into believing the world we live in is the way it is. And now the great deception has been the mainstream media and religions and governments. We are, in the main, as the public, individuals, disempowered. But this is a point in history. Now, Pope Ellis, for those who are unfamiliar with Pope Ellis, is an extraterrestrial spiritual leader who has seen millennia of change on the planet Earth, going back hundreds of thousands of years to the possible colonization of Antarctica about 450,000 years ago. Antarctica is a place that few people have ever been to, and it's highly guarded. Just a brief sort of investigation would show that Antarctica is a strange and mysterious land. In fact, it's 2 blocks of land. But anyway, I'm digressing from the question. So Pope Ellis is able to see things that we are unaware of. Great cosmic changes, shifts and rhythms in the life of this planet. And also that we aren't alone here. I mean, it's generally accepted these days that we aren't alone in the universe. But what people don't realize is that extraterrestrials have been on this planet from day one. And we, in many ways, are extraterrestrials. But that's a big story, obviously. So yes, what are these changes? Well, as there's that word revelations, so there's big disclosures, even like I've just mentioned, that we aren't alone here, we haven't been alone. Governments have been working with extraterrestrials. That's one thing. But who are these extraterrestrials and what activities have been taking place? So that's another thing. So in many ways, whilst we're living on the surface of this planet, when the propaganda of the mainstream media starts to crack and fall apart, we'll be like prisoners stumbling from dungeons into the sunlight. Now, I think that's what she's talking about. Our eyes will hurt from the blinding truth. And we are in a stage, that quote from Alice in Wonderland at the beginning, the time has come, the walrus said, to speak of many things, to talk of many things. That's from, as you know, Alice in Wonderland, and then there's Alice Through the Looking Glass. Pope Alice puts great store by those stories, as surreal as they are. She claims they're based on her life. And very interestingly, these days, particularly in recent times, Alice, White Rabbit, Rabbit Hole have become catchphrases. So I think it's mentioned in the letter, you know, that Pope Ellis has been deep down the rabbit hole.
Mm.
That's an expression for knowing some of the truly awful secrets of this planet. And there's a great awakening taking place. People are waking up. And I think this time now that we're in, which is depending on how you approach it and how you use it, and there's billions on this planet, so many people will be, you know, there's billions and billions of different ways of utilizing this time. But I think many people are using it as a form of relaxation. Some will find it stressful, obviously, but some may stumble across information that they haven't had the opportunity to do before. And that's what I think it's all about, research and investigation. And if you think The Guardian is an alternative research, or Fox News, these are just controlled opposition. So until you start actually going into some of the conspiracy theories, so-called, entertaining just the opposite of what's being said in the mainstream media, then you might start to find out a different story. Stories plural.
Mm. And I've got to say, just back to Alice's remarkable letter, there is quite a simple message there too, Luke. If I can just read briefly from it. Pope Alice says at the end, "Do not forget what it is to be human, caring and sharing and loving. Darkness cannot coexist in the presence of light. The old world was illusion. Paradise is regained." I must say that last few words, "paradise is regained," is a fabulous call to possibility of a better future for all of us, I'd say.
Well, this is what is possible. Pope Ellis tends to talk in the, you know, the affirmative by saying things in the present if they are what we wish to have come true, what we are striving for, what is good. You know, it's affirmative affirmation, they're affirmations. So paradise is regained. Well, people reading that would say, well, show it to me, where is it? Well, it means that it's up to us. We can regain paradise because there's technology that's suppressed that can liberate us from so much of the stress of daily life. We really are kept into a particular conforming paradigm here on Earth. We're controlled and manipulated. And once again, you know, the mainstream media has a lot to answer for, informing people's opinions. People think they're well and truly informed when the propaganda machines owned by, the most mainstream media is owned by 6 mega corporations who do not have our best interests at heart. They have only their interests at heart. So paradise can be regained, but I believe paradise is being regained. And that's, of course, alluding to mythology. Was there a paradise in the first place? So as we know and stated in that letter, Pope Alice comes out of mythology. She's mythology personified. So let's not completely dismiss the old stories. Also, just because we may think the devil doesn't exist, that there's no such thing as Satan and Lucifer, does not mean that those controlling this planet think the same as us. In fact, they don't. The evidence is there that they worship Satan. And that's an ugly story.
That is when Satan comes.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know where to look.
We'll just leave that one for the moment.
Yeah.
Had to be said.
But I think also it's been wonderful to talk about Pope Alice, but you yourself have been doing some new work and new investigations and finding some really interesting explorations through your research around cultural history and mythology. Can you talk a little bit about your new body of work that you're sort of, there's a whole new understanding and reading around what you've been doing?
Well, it's a progression that unfolds and informs me. It educates me as I go along. Pope Alice has been an extraordinary association for me because I've learnt so much by being her close companion, you know, by being her very inadequate manager and publicist. But at the same time, we've got this far 40 years later. So the artwork that I make has always been using a great deal of intuition, and I'm amazed by where it's led me. And say about 12 years ago, I went back to my hometown and started unfurling my own story and revisiting childhood places. My family was all, well, my parents were both alive and they were still living in the town. And that's the town that I was born in. And of course, I've been going back there every year. But it was a time because none of the family live in the town now. But anyway, I'm leading into the way in which my art works. And so I did that work, which was very it was an exorcism of sorts. I often call my works exorcisms. And when there's a changing of gears going on. And then I went to Rome and to the British school and visited the Vatican. Pope Alice visited the Vatican. That was a major turning point. I'd never wanted to take her to the Vatican, but the time had come for that. And that was just months before Benedict XVI resigned. Who knows what part Pope Alice played in that? There's an interesting little detail in the video where Benedict's at the window and Pope Alice makes this gesture for the Sunday audience, you know, in St. Peter's Square. And the Italian fine arts master at the British school said that that was the old Italian gesture for saying goodbye. Before the British troops arrived in World War II, and this became goodbye. Up until then, that was goodbye in Italy. So that was interesting. And anyway, so there's more to talk about there. One detail which was interesting, I did this video, Benny and Ellis, a love story. So it was this idea of Pope Alice and Benedict being some sort of, it was put to the tune of "The Carnival is Over." And that's just before Francis was elected. And you would have seen how Benedict liked to get into all the ecclesiastical drag, you know, the more elaborate, the better. And of course, I'm fascinated by that. I'm intrigued, but you know, that's kind of like romping in riches while the world's starving. But nonetheless, you know, I have always loved theatre and performance. That's what inspired me, the church, in so many ways in my artwork. And then when Pope Francis was elected, after I'd made this video, by the way, apparently backstage, before he came out on the balcony, he refused to wear the red cape and the red stole and other things. He just came out in the white. And he said, when they tried to put this on, he said, no, the carnival is finished.
Right.
So he's been much more reduced in his use of ecclesiastical grandeur in terms of vestments.
Because can I just segue back to Pope Alice's letter that I received last night? There was a mention of it that it's the symbology that has sort of let down the other side, meaning
yes.
the adversaries it's the symbology that is what's going to be their downfall. Is that what you're talking a little bit about in regards to
A
this?
little bit, but not exactly. But let's not go there. That's a huge subject there.
Okay.
We can go there later.
Let's stay.
Just to move through to get to answer the question, because I do tend to sort of start way back in the investigation of a question. So after Rome, I started, it wasn't the first time, I'd been doing these screaming artworks based on Munch's The Scream, even in the 1980s, 70s. I would stand here in Brisbane and do screams, you know, on a corner somewhere. That was my way of, my frustration with the world and etc. And then I even did some of those when I lived in Europe. I remember these people at a restaurant in Paris being particularly alarmed when I'm across the street screaming, you know, mostly just to get a photograph, not any extended long-term thing. Yeah. And then I was doing these other, in 2003 when I came back, I did at Milani Gallery a show called Amaroma, which had flames going up, and that was basically about people fiddling whilst Rome burnt, with all the implications. I put that into the current time. I think that, you know, the art world was just seemingly oblivious to what's been going on, because there's been a huge lead up to this point now in history. Mm. And they were involved with mythology, and I've been investigating religion and mythology all the way along. It was what inspired Pope Ellis when I read Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken, and he connected all these ancient structures and artifacts with the possibility of extraterrestrials having visited Earth and having had contact with humans and inspiring humans. And I've never looked back from that. That's a major possibility. Mm. So moving to this current series of photo shoots over the last couple of years, and you graciously got involved in the final one, or the last one rather than the final one, and I'm working on those images now. Ancient Greece was the inspiration, and I think I was wanting to go back to some kind of touchstone where it seemed life was grand and elegant and a high point of culture. But of course, you know, that's our impression at this distance. You know, I don't think women did so well in Greece, even though they had some very powerful goddesses, of which I got you to personify a couple in the photo shoot. And so in working with those images, and you may recall when we were working, I would say that I work intuitively. I'm not quite sure exactly why I want to do this, but this is where I'm going, and this is what I want to do. And then later, and this has happened so often, I'll look at the photographs and then I'll understand what I've been doing. And one of the things that came out of this, because we had the two Eurasian models, half brother and sister, I've known them since they were children, and they were, this is the first time we worked together. They're young adults now. And I thought, well, introducing Eurasian people into what's based around ancient Greeks, what's that about? And then, of course, it dawned on me because of later that what I was really working with, and I've done other images in the past about this, was Alexander the Great's conquering of so much of the Middle East and up into Afghanistan and to the gates of India. I don't know how far he went into current day India, but that influenced the way in which Buddha was depicted. So there's this term, Greco-Buddhist. And so that, I was so delighted, you know, when I realized, oh yes, that's right, it's coming back, because I had done earlier works about the possibility that Christ visited, this was 12 years ago, Christ visited India and Tibet. That's a possibility. You know, there's the missing years when he was 12 to 30. And obviously, I believe that he existed. Some people say he didn't, whatever. There's one of the most contentious people in history, I suppose. Mm. But also one of the most fantastic. So incredible human being. So it doesn't matter what well, it does matter in so many ways, but I'm saying it's so, there's so many stories around Christ and his life and the possibilities there. That's the sort of thing that will be revealed, I think, more and more. We'll get more evidence. I'm not quite sure how, but religions, I think, are going to be hugely challenged as humanity awakens. And that's what's going on. We're waking up, and we have to wake up and quickly, because we are controlled and manipulated. But I believe that that's now weakening.
I think from listening to what you're saying also is that our perception of humanity and history is such a small fragment of what potentially the history of this planet is and the universe, and therefore the way we try to understand who we are is based on such small evidence that we only have the capacity to understand a little piece of. So we still don't have really any insight into what we are and who we are and where we are right now. And I think it feels to me that when you're working, it's like you're intuitively pulling on these pieces of information and formulating something that later on reveals itself.
Exactly. I'm definitely working on the bigger picture, but I'm human, of course, as well, and so my capacities are limited. But in many ways, I do think that we can shift from 3 dimensions to 5 dimensions, and in some ways, that's what's taking place. And so we will develop our telepathy and our other capacities that I believe we have. I believe that's part of our shutdown. When you look at the old stories, even if you look at the Bible, being cast out of the Garden of Eden, cast out of paradise, why was that? It was about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so something happened with humanity that we've been trying to struggle to get back to ever since. We were, I think, much more, I'll use the term switched on. A lot of this is to do with our DNA. Some people say we have 12 strands of DNA, most of which we don't use. I think, for example, that we've had an aging button within us. I think aging is a disease. There were people recorded in the Bible who lived for hundreds of years. I think that's true. I think they did. I think a medical procedure in the future could be discovered where we could switch off old age. Now that's a bit mind-boggling to people who may have heard that for the first time, but these are old ideas. And that's what we're talking about here, old ideas that people don't know about. That we haven't been properly educated about our own history. History is always written by the victors, those who have won.
Yes.
Whatever the battle is, or whatever the paradigm is, of one control over the narrative. And the narrative that we have is hugely controlled and censored. Look what's happening on Facebook and YouTube. I mean, here we're on Facebook, or eventually going to be. They can shut down anything they don't want. They talk about community values. It's not community values. It's what they don't want the community to hear. They don't want the community to have choice about alternative points of view. So many subjects, matters are taboo. And if you don't use code to talk about them, or if you don't, or if you come to their attention, then you're demonetized or actually taken down. Why is that?
And you yourself must get quite a bit of pushback sometimes from certain members of the community about your views or about what you're saying. How do you deal with that? If you make a statement and then I've noticed sometimes you do get people will sort of criticize you? Is that, how does that sit with you?
Oh, well, that's life, isn't it?
Mm.
We all get criticism one way or another. Um, we all have our stories. I must admit that I can handle it better these days. I think it's important to always keep a sense of humor about life and to not hold on to anything too desperately. I believe Pope Ellis says in that letter, question everything. So you must even question yourself. You have to question your own points of view. I'm
Mm.
not God. I don't know the truth. I've just done way more investigation and research, it seems apparent to me, than most of the people that I know, and certainly the ones that criticize me, because you can tell by their criticism that it's based on the ABC News or SBS or just the mainstream media. And you sort of think, well, if that's your source of information, your only source of information, then I feel sorry for you, really.
Now, talking about Pope Alice, I'm going to move, and I know just as her PR manager, she was going to make an incredible appearance at Dark Mofo this year down in Tasmania, and because of everything that happened, that's the whole event was cancelled. How is she dealing with this? And this moment's impacted a lot on creatives' lives and yours as well. Are there other things that it's influenced, or that's my dog escaping? Sorry, it's like an earthquake. So what else has happened to you in your own life, in your work, Luke?
Well, two things there. There's Pope Alice's life and there's mine. And she was very much looking forward to Dark Mofo. So many people have been there and speak so highly of that event. And it was one of the first things cancelled before it became obligatory to cancel events. So it was cancelled early on, but just a week or so beforehand. And with the rest of my work, it's sort of increased. I've always worked from home, and I've been very busy. First of all, working on the photo shoot that we talked about earlier, and that's been terrific. I work with a photoshopper in Melbourne, and this is what you can do now is with the internet. I have been informed that money for a major show of my work coming up next year in Rockhampton. They'll have a brand new museum up there, art gallery museum. So the money's come through for that. I've had to do various bits of writing for one reason or another. I'm working on a grant application for a young woman in Melbourne who's working with a dramaturg to explore ideas of the Virgin Mary and femininity and queerness. And I'm delighted. She's worked with me in a couple of performances in Melbourne in the past, one in the Great Hall at the National Gallery and the other one at the Melbourne Art Fair. And so I'm delighted, that younger people are approaching me for some kind of information or guidance or mentorship. So that's been one other thing. I've got plenty to do. And I understand, of course, that many artists must be struggling terribly. I'm in the fortunate position these days of being a senior citizen and having a pension. If without that, I'm not quite sure what I'd be doing. Because there's not the same kind of avenues for making an income, although I can use the internet more and more.
Yeah.
And so I have great sympathy. There are particular actions taking place to consider artists in the broad sense, including actors as well, that are not getting the jobs.
Yeah. Now, when we did the photo shoot, I was Aphrodite and Athena, and I'm going to put my Aphrodite hat on again now. And I'm going to ask you,
That's your Aphrodite hat. That wasn't the one in the shoot. I love that one.
And it can be a mohawk as well. But Aphrodite is very interested in how COVID-19 has affected your love life during this period, Luke Roberts.
Oh, well, that's one of those questions, isn't it? I don't know what to say, except as Pope Ellis says, love triumphs over all. Love, as you know, Aphrodite, has many meanings. And so love life often means sex. Well, I don't know that many people are having a great sex life unless they're living with a partner and in a heterosexual situation. I think there's probably going to be a baby boom. That's the prediction in 9 months. They've already got a name for them, the quarantines.
Oh,
and,
fantastic.
So let's see. But I think this is to take a broader understanding of love, amour, which is Roma back to front, and that's what that show of mine was, Amor Roma, is to say that yes, I think we mustn't lose sight of being caring, sharing, and loving as human beings. And this is a time, I think, when there probably is a great deal of love about, and a great deal of love starting to blossom, because people have had time to think about their lives, to think about how we treat each other. There's restlessness going on. There's whatever you want to know, name, that's going on at the moment. But I think a general shift is a positive shift is taking place, and it has to.
And I think also that people have had to spend a lot of time alone. Potentially there is a lot of self-love, both sexual, but also within your relationship to yourself. And if that's happening on a global level, then if our relationships with ourselves become clearer and more defined and probably a better quality, therefore our ability to love others becomes stronger as well. So potentially in this moment, for everyone, when it comes to love beyond just sexual love, the love of others in oneself, this could be an incredible moment as well. And maybe that's what Pope Ellis is tuning in on.
Oh yes, certainly advising that we don't lose sight of. I think there would be many people, such as myself, living alone in social distancing, isolation. So as you've said, a major, and I know you said it in two ways with two meanings, but I'm going to take it to the higher meaning. Self-love is the key. If we don't love ourselves, how the hell can we really love anybody else properly, actually? So we're not given so many, or well, the keys are there, the tools are there, but we're not taught, directed towards loving ourselves, being, caring for ourselves, because that's self-empowerment. And the powers that be do not want us to be self-empowered because that's too difficult for them to deal with. They want the opposite. They want sheeple. They want dumbed down people.
And finally, if people want to, can other people access Pope Ellis's letter, or is it only for the select few at the moment, Luke?
Oh, no. I've been very slow with my reorganization, as Pope Ellis's everything, manager, bag carrier, online communicator, social media, PR. I've been reconstructing her website. I will put it up on the website. I actually, now that we're talking about, I think I'll put it on Facebook. Pope Ellis has a Facebook page. So after this conversation, I'll place it on Facebook.
Fantastic. And I'll put a link in the interview so people can find it.
Yes. So the Pope Ellis Facebook page, yes.
Well, thank you Oh, sorry.
This is being pre-recorded, it'll be no doubt be on, but up there by the time people access this interview.
Well, thank you so much for this very timely conversation. It's been wonderful to get your insights into Her Highness's sense of what's happening in the world and how we can all tap into the potential of our own power, it sounds like, Luke. So thanks again. And you look fabulous there.
I'm just delighted in seeing how much your hair's grown since the photo shoot, which wasn't long ago, but looking brilliant, looking marvelous. And one other thing, Beck, is that I wasn't evading the question of symbolism before, but sometime in the future, who knows when it's suitable, because that's a big subject. We may be able to have a talk about that.
Well, we'll have to come back for part 2. You know, we could be in lockdown for years, Luke, so we've got plenty of time here. All right, thank you very much.
Right, lockdown is a state of mind. Bye.
All right, stop recording.